and we're live with our 253rd episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on social media, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on social media. Seth, say hi.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. We are excited today to have Justin Collins with us. Justin was one of our first guests on the podcast at some, conference that may or may not exist or may not have happened within the last couple of weeks. Something in Hawaii. Anyway, we will get to Justin and what he has been doing over the last couple of years. As far as announcements go, I've got a couple of them that we need to drop in there. First of all is the Melbourne training. That's going to be September 10th and 11th in Melbourne, Australia. You can find details at training.absoluteappsec.com, and I'll drop the link in there. Please feel free to join us, come with. Love to have more people there. It's our first time going in Australia since 2019, since pre-pandemic. We had been there for, a couple of years up to that point, but we're finally making a return. So excited to see all of our listeners, all of our friends that are down there, and also do a course on secure code review as usual. Besides that, DEF CON is coming up. We do have an event that we will be running. We'll be jumping into the high roller as a podcast crew or podcast guests, whatever it is. If you are going to be at DEF CON, please join Slack and reach out to us for an invite. It is limited availability. We only have about 25 slots for people to ride the roller with us and would love to have you there. So if you're going to be available, it's going to be Friday night at, if I remember right, 8 o'clock, right, Ken?
Yes, 8 o'clock. It's going to be at the high roller behind the link. So it's that big observatory circle. You'll get on there, you get swag, you'll get drinks, you'll get a good view, some good entertainment options. So that is why it is kind of an exclusive event, very limited. So yeah, please reach out if you'd like.
Yep. And even if we fill up, we will be, hanging out at a bar close to high roller after. We'll send out those details once we know more, once we get to Vegas and we know where we're going to be that evening. So please, come along and we will see you there. Otherwise, I think that's about it for now. I'm in full on prep for DEF CON mode on my end. So Hacker Tracker and all those things. Trying to make sure that we're still completing everything I need on the business side and then doing, some heavy development. So if you're not using Hacker Tracker for DEF CON, you should be. Besides, Las Vegas is in there as well, as is Diana Initiative, who we have co-sponsored as well. And yeah, anyway, so that's DEF CON. Justin, are you going to be down at Hacker Summer Camp?
I will be. The team expressed strong interest in going this year, so we'll be at DEF CON. Very excited, and definitely endorse Hacker Tracker as a critical resource for that week.
Yeah. For those that have been listening to the podcast for a while, they do know about Hacker Tracker, right? If you're new to the podcast, it is an application. It doesn't actually track hackers, right? That is a misnomer. It actually it's a scheduling application for security conferences. That's it. I got involved because, 10 plus years ago when iOS was new, there wasn't a good way to actually track digitally the conferences, DEF CON specifically, and wanted something there. And so I've been doing it for a number of years. Great. So Justin, the last time that we had you on the podcast was, I want to say, that was 2018,
I think.
Spring. Yeah, spring of summer 2018. You and Ken were at Locomocosec, sitting on the beach, and I was
Where were you,
at
Seth?
home suffering. I don't.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. And I should have rewatched it, but sadly I didn't, because we looked at it first thing this morning when we jumped on. But that's been a while.
Yeah, I want to actually give a recap too of for Justin, if you don't mind, just so that everybody kind of because they may not have watched the episode. It's been a while. And if you don't know Justin, you most certainly know his work, right? So Brakeman Scanner, the most prolific, at least in for a long time there, one of the most prolific open source SaaS tools. It works incredibly well, incredibly quickly. Justin spent a lot of time on that tool that was ultimately purchased by Synopsys. Is that correct?
Yep.
Synopsys. But in any case, Justin, was kind of the resource for anything Ruby on Rails security for a long time. But Justin's like worked, in defense, internal kind of teaming for some of the biggest organizations, currently at Gusto. But, when I met Justin originally, he was with Neil Matatal at Twitter. We were like the only folks doing, trying to secure Ruby. Well, the only folks publicly discussing trying to secure Ruby on Rails apps, for tech companies. I was at Living Social at the time. So that's I had kind of Googled around, found Justin's first version of the Brakeman scanner that was out there, talked with Justin. Neil and Justin became kind of a resource to bounce things off of. But then I ended up actually having Justin come out, and it's awesome because when Justin came out to give on-site training to our devs, one of our devs, Tom, actually found vulnerabilities real time in the class, started fixing them. And so then we went on break, and he's like, yeah, these things you just discussed, I actually found in our source code. I pushed fixes for it. I validated that we're good. And that was the moment. That was awesome. And so from that point on, I've been like a huge fan of Justin and his work. I know a lot of people are. So that's just my very personal sort of experience getting to know Justin over the years. And so anyways, welcome to the show, Justin. Again, welcome to the show again.
Thanks. That invite to do that training, because I think I've done very, very few trainings, and it's hard. It's hard work. But also I was like, wow, these people like want to fly me out, because it was like Virginia, right?
Yeah, DC, yeah.
And like do this training, and I don't even know how we worked out like the money part, because I was like, I don't know, like what do people charge?
Hopefully you got paid, because Living Social's not around. So
yeah, that was an experience for sure. Yeah, I was like, wow, someone wants me to come out and like do training for them. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Well, it worked. Apparently you did. So it was really well received on our end. And also because, who else was doing not just like application security, OWASP top 10 training, but stuff that's specifically geared for Ruby on Rails / just Ruby in general. Because I think we had some Sinatra apps too, where it was helpful as well. So there's nobody,
Yeah. Well, I mean, in general, that's the developer communities for some of these languages and frameworks are pretty large, and you still see that, right? Like that would be one of my recommendations to juniors as they get into things, is to pick one of the languages in AppSec and really like specialize in it, right? Like I mean, Justin, I know like with Rails and Ruby, that was, I mean, I think we talked about it, or I don't know if I've heard it from you in the past, but the Brakeman scanner in general, wasn't that like some sort of was it a school project that started as, and then like evolved from there? Can you kind of give us the background on that?
Internship project project at AT&T Interactive / yellowpages.com. I open sourced it at the end of the internship. I was like, can I open source this? And they're like, okay, sure. That did not go through the legal team, so hopefully they're cool with it. And the funny thing is, once I left the internship, I definitely presented at a Ruby meetup in LA, but then I was kind of like, well, I'm not like building Rails apps, so I didn't really have any reason to work on it. But a few months later, I went back to work full time at AT&T. So then basically for the next year, I was working on Brakeman as part of my role there, before going to Twitter. So it was an internship project. And the funny thing is, it's not really useful to me unless I'm kind of working at a Rails shop.
Yeah.
That's how it got
like all true security tools, right? Like that's I mean, there's a wider acceptance, and it seems like, Brakeman, especially with support from, being bought and everything that's gone along there, it's like there's at least movement, and it is staying up to date, right? Like a lot of good security tools go to die after someone leaves a job and doesn't need to maintain it anymore, right?
Yep.
Sadly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See,
Cool.
my cousin Rico is here. Hey, Rico.
Oh, sweet. Yes, he is.
We worked together at AT&T.
AT&T
Oh, that's awesome.
back in the day. Yeah. Good. Well, let's see. Where do we want to take the conversation today, Ken? Right? Like,
well, I definitely want to hear what.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely want to hear about Justin's current challenges, right? Because he's managing security, and there's a lot more than just AppSec or just this or just that going on with Justin these days. So I guess since it's been almost 6 years now. What has gone on career-wise in the last 6 years leading up to where you're at now? And we'll start there, and then we'll talk about some of your current challenges that you face, and just what kind of things that you're trying to solve for these days.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so six years ago.
Nothing's happened in 6 years, right?
I know. Yeah, we did have the Brakeman Pro. We made a commercial version of Brakeman Pro. Neil and Jim Manico and I banded together, made that version. Tried to run a company for a little while. Got a decent number of customers, but wasn't actually making a lot of money from it, and had the opportunity to sell it. And Synopsys ended up acquiring it. It did get integrated into Coverity. So I spent a year at Synopsys as a C++ developer. And that's very much in quotes, more like C++ copy and paster and see if it will compile kind of a thing. I worked a little bit on some of the Ruby rules for Coverity, and then kind of briefly worked on some Go support in Coverity. But then went over to Gusto, joined as part of product security, ended up leading product security, and that team really grew. We ended up splitting into product security engineering, security partners, and then we also had the identity engineering team joined and ended up reporting into me, as well as privacy engineering. And then our CISO Flea left and took a role at Reddit. And when he left, I kind of stepped into his role, not officially CISO, but heading up the security org, and also ended up taking on GRC and then our security engineering, defense engineering operations team as well. So covering all of those areas right now. We have a team of 30 right now at Gusto.
So are you saying your product security engineering, general, it sounded like security engineering, is that right? And then there was a third thing you mentioned that I didn't.
GRC.
GRC, there you go.
Yep.
So you're in charge of all that now, huh?
I'm covering all of that now.
Oh, wow, that's a lot to. So what's a day? Walk us through like a day or a week in your life right now, man. That's gotta be a lot.
Oh, that's very easy. It's meetings from start till stop. I do have quite a few direct reports right now. We're filling at least one management role right now. So I have quite a few direct reports. So meetings with all of them, meetings with the teams, meeting with leadership. It's a lot of directing, pointing, in directions, planning, and then some interaction with other teams on, just the usual consulting, what do we need to think about security wise for this or that, and a lot of delegation to, okay, for this problem, you need to go and talk to this person on the team or these people or that team. Yeah. And we're still on the product security side. still building things. I mean, I'm not personally.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, that was going to be one of my questions is like, you have such deep technical expertise and background, how does that play into your current role and does it help you in any way? Is that something you found to be valuable? Obviously there are two separate skill sets, managing and then having those very deep technical roots, but is there any sort of place where that overlaps and it helps or
I think
does it
so.
hurt,
I think so. For me, it's kind of hard to jump into something if I don't understand it. And when I'm getting asked, like, well, how hard is this? What is the timeline for this? How long would it take to do this or that? Or if we're giving advice, right? If we're saying, hey, you should build it this way or that way, understanding if that's a difficult request or an easy request is really important. So for me, understanding at least the shape of our code, what are our applications, what do they look like, how do they talk to each other, where do things sit? Sometimes even just knowing, different aspects. I've been at Gusto 4.5 years now, and that's been enough time to pick up a lot of knowledge of what do we have, where does it sit. I can't always keep track of which teams are in charge of what, but at least knowing, okay, these are the code bases. Of course, I'm still at heart application security person, so I want to know where are our applications, where's the code, where are they running, what do they look like, and I find that extremely valuable. Honestly, I get a little bit uncomfortable when I'm in a situation where it's like, oh, I don't quite know how that's implemented. I don't quite know the details of that. So I find it incredibly helpful. I did. Our last review season, I was surprised that I did have like 5 pull requests that I had merged. But I mean, they were all very small things. But I do like to still be a little bit involved, even if there's not really a lot of time for that. And honestly, there's enough people, excellent people on the team. I don't need to be writing code.
right?
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to know, when to back away, when to lean in. And trusting others is obviously vital. Very difficult. Do you do a lot of syncs, like one-on-one syncs? Because you said you were on a lot of meetings. Are those sort of like, just a lot of one-on-one syncs, or are they sort of, executive or even peer related? Because I remember when I was managing, there were a lot of conversations I would have to have with other managers. So what's your breakdown there look like?
We have a really strong one-on-one culture at Gusto. So I pretty much meet every week one-on-one with everybody who reports directly to me. And there's some team meetings as well. There's definitely the sort of horizontal meetings and then the reporting upwards meetings. All of that. And then some meetings, sometimes it's things need to be mediated. Sometimes you just need to weigh in, and sometimes you just need to be present and be like, security's here. For example, there was a really good meeting yesterday that was just about customer pain points. And some of those customer pain points are actually owned by the security team. So it was great to be able to listen in on that and understand where we are and where we're going. And also we had someone from the team presenting on some progress we've made around logins. So it's all over the place, really, but still, very much engineering and product focused.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, my question to you is like that transition from going so technical to being more of a manager, is it one that you're finding fulfillment in? I mean, I know it's not for everyone, like making that sort of transition. We had a discussion last week or a couple weeks ago about like the staff engineer style role, where you become like the senior technical resource without moving into management. But how do you feel like that's gone for you? What would you suggest if someone is making that jump?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think at this point, I've been in a management role long enough that I'm used to it. It's definitely different. It's a totally different skill set for sure. as we were just talking about, I do think if you're managing technical people, it's good to have that technical experience and understand what they're working with, and be able to give direction on that side. Certainly there's a step away from like, okay, like I want to be implementing things, I want to be writing code, and it is definitely more people management. But I think that for me personally, the things that I find exciting and fulfilling is really when we get work done, right? When you land something and you're like, oh, we've like solved a problem, right? Or we've closed a set of vulnerabilities, or we've improved a process and we can see that improvement. That is the kind of thing that where you start saying like, well, I didn't personally implement that, but the team did. And that's exciting, right? Also, something you learn as a manager is that you get the credit for those things. You also get the blame when things go wrong, right? So that's like, I think one of the weirdest things maybe going into management is when you realize like, oh, the team's achievements are my achievements, right? It's like, well, I didn't do that personally. Yeah, but you ran the team, right? Like you set the direction, you helped with that achievement. And that's definitely a mindset shift that you kind of have to make. And that was a kind of a hard one for me, I would say. There's still challenges. I know the team would probably say, I think like the areas where you have to like give feedback and direction, when people are looking for career growth, career advice, that's an area where I still kind of struggle. I think my own career has never been very deliberate. So I think it's kind of hard for me to put myself in the mindset and say, okay, like these are directions to go in. That being said, from my point of view, especially because we're still doing a lot of hiring on the security team at Gusto, I think there's a lot of room for those staff roles of, hey, I want to be in an architect role. I want to be giving advice. I want to be giving security direction, but I don't necessarily want to be managing people. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. And I think it's good to figure out, do you want to be in a management role or do you want to be in that staff or principal role, which has a lot of the same benefits of setting direction, having really cool projects that you're contributing to. And a lot of those end up being team efforts, and you get that same sort of like, hey, as a team, we achieved something, without some of the like, oh, okay, people are relying on me for their paychecks and, I have to give performance feedback and those kinds of things. So I think it's not a bad path to go down. And again, we're kind of looking to hire in that area. So I realize it's the reason, part of why I'm saying this is because you don't have to go into a like, oh, I'm managing a team now in order to get some of those benefits of being in a senior role. It does seem like people are kind of like, oh, now I have to be a director of something, or I need to be like the manager in order to have that kind of impact. And depending on the team and the company, of course, you don't necessarily have to be in that kind of role.
Yeah. It's an interesting balance, right? Like, and I know it's one, like, even like my small team over at Redpoint that I struggle with is like, hey, I've got like the soft skills portion of like managing people, like trying to get, inspire people or whatever it is to do like good technical work. But I do find myself wanting to roll up my sleeves and just jump in, right? Like from a technical perspective, because that is my background. And part of this is a selfish reason that I'm asking you, is because like I do find that struggle is, hey, I can't be on every single assessment. I can't be looking at every single line of code for all of our customers, but I am still responsible for the product at the end of the day, is like what's going out the door, right? And so putting in, these I don't even like achievements or whatever it is to help inspire people or help people like grow their own careers. it's difficult to be hands off when it comes to that, right? And not want to jump in. So how do you balance that, right? Like, what is it that, like, how did you make that transition? Is what I'm asking.
So a couple of things. One, I just did leadership training at Gusto, and one of the points, and I forget the book that this comes from, but it's about doing less. And one of the points is to stop adding too much value. So when you jump into a situation, you're like, oh, I know the answer. Sometimes you need to step back and let the other people on the team answer, or find the answer, or work through how to get to the answer, which is challenging. As I think is challenging for a lot of people in leadership roles. However, for me, it's been forced upon me. The team is too big, and the responsibilities are a little bit broad. So I have to step back. I have to say, hey, I'm not going to be in this meeting, right? But I know that the people who are in the meeting can handle it. And I know if something comes up and they need direction, or they need a decision made, or they're like, I'm not sure that I know what to do here, I know that they'll come to me, right? And they'll ask the questions, and we can figure it out. One thing that I've tried to do a little bit sometimes is maybe back channel to the person rather than like jumping into the conversation. So especially like on Slack, right? It's very easy. Like, okay, there's a thread, and instead of me answering, let me like talk to the person on my team who is answering, and, kind of give them my perspective. So at least they have that. Right. And, at this point for me, I don't need the credit, right? Like, right. That's not the point. The point is, hey, okay, here, like, let's make sure the people on the team are getting that opportunity. And again, we have a great team at Gusto, and we have enough people to cover a lot of different areas. So at some point, you do have to trust the team and take that step back.
How do you?
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Oh, no, I was going to ask, because you've talked about a lot of the accomplishments I'll set the stage. I struggled with. It's kind of funny. I noticed that for me, anyways, with people that were some of my like heads down, give them an abstract kind of goal, they'll figure out how to achieve it. Not a ton of direction, but just get things done all the time. I know they're dependable. I can hand things off to them. What I struggle with those folks were actually getting them to record their accomplishments. And so for me, it was different strategies. I don't know if I found one that like was flawless and worked. A lot of times we try to, on one-on-ones every once in a while, maybe once a month, try to capture these folks' accomplishments on a rolling Google Doc, nothing fancy. I don't know if you have, I don't know if you have that same kind of struggle at times, or have had those same kind of struggles. If you have a different way of approaching solving them, that was always just a difficult thing for me to capture. So yeah, do you have?
Yeah, so I'm not great at this either. I will say that up front. I'm not great at this. However, what I do try to make sure is when it comes time for performance season, that when people are trying to kind of put down their accomplishments, sometimes people undersell themselves, right? And there are definitely areas where it's like, hey, remember you did that thing, right? Or sometimes what I've noticed for some folks on the team, right, is like, hey, the work that you captured some of the project work, but you didn't capture some of the work that you do on a regular basis. And that's really valuable work too. And we need to capture that. So yeah, I don't have a perfect solution there. I'm not good at it myself. The best thing I agree is like just have a doc where you're keeping track of these things. For a little while, I tried to do like a daily one. So like end of the day, what did I do today? And just note it down. Again, I'm not good at these things, but I will say when I was doing that, and I had like a calendar reminder, like make sure like you log these, what did you do today? it made it super easy to look back and be like, oh yeah, like I did these things, and oh yeah, there was that meeting and it was a really hard conversation, but we had a good outcome, and being able to look back and then put that together into like, oh yeah, like there's a bunch of stuff that I did.
Yeah, and now that we've got like summarization GPT style options, I know
There you
for
go.
real. I mean,
Yeah.
you could just literally pilfer them over your docs and say like, give me the most incredible things that were done or the most significant things or whatever. If you had a
Double,
massive amount of
double check for hallucinations though. All right.
double check always, or maybe triple check.
No, it's fine. Triple check. Make sure there's hallucinations in there. Just keep your manager honest. I don't know.
It is a I don't know if it's appreciated by ICs as much, because the other thing that doesn't really get taken into account, or maybe it doesn't, but I so, and again, I don't know your particular review to promotion cycle sort of timelines is different everywhere, but I can tell you at GitHub we had a couple significant times a year. They mapped within close proximity to those review dates, but they were not a one-to-one, right? So they might happen a month or a month and a half before the actual reviews go. It's easy when someone hands you, like if you've got this running Google, it's easier when you have a running Google Doc. It's somewhat easy if you don't have that. And for instance, if you're just doing the review part, people can submit like their self-reflective kind of review stuff, and then you can iterate over that, look at, compare against your notes, add to whatever you already have a base to build off of. Great. The problem is that, or at least the problem I faced, was that the review cycle time not matching up with promotion time meant that I was wholly on my own to build these cases for people to get the promotions. And for me as a manager, I don't believe that my job is to be technical. I don't believe my job. I mean, of course I have that background and it of course helps, but my day-to-day doesn't look like that. I'm supposed to be managing communication and, oversight and making sure I understand what's going on in other parts of the company to relate to the team and do all those things, but also to get you promoted. Like, to me, that's a big part of managing, is to get people that extra bump in salary to help them get to that next level in their career, as fast is reasonable and feasible and obviously earned. So then, anyways, I guess why I'm just going on this tangent is that I don't know that if like ICs understand how important it is to give that ammo to EMs, to engineering managers, so that we can go and fight for you. Because, again, it's different everywhere, but there were times where I would get told, okay, on Wednesday, this is Monday, right? On Wednesday, we're going to go and we're going to start putting in our numbers for everybody. And then that's going to be against a group of people. So you're actually kind of competing against other people for your number. And you have to go out there. And now I've got 2 days notice to justify everything that you've done for the last 6 months and why you, or a year, like why you deserve this promotion. So anyways, I just think it's very, very important that there's some sort of mechanism. I just haven't figured out the best one yet, or how to put that, or, impose that importance on people for their own benefit.
Yeah. So at Gusto, our performance reviews and promotions happen at the same time. So we don't have that particular issue. I do think it is important for people to understand, depending on the size of your team, your manager may or may not know everything that you do, right? So having that log, having the notes, being able to put that together, I agree, is very important. Also want to note at Gusto, you're never in competition for promotions.
That's amazing. That is amazing. I don't like that, but yeah, it's real reality, right?
Yeah, people seem to think that a lot. At Gusto, that's not the case. If whoever deserves it, well, I mean, assuming we get the case together, and there's a lot of facets to it, but the point is, it's not a competition at that point. But yeah, going back to, do you want to be a manager, right? The scariest thing is, at least in the society we live in, this is people's lives, right? Yeah. Getting that promotion, getting that raise, or, getting laid off, right? Or whatever it is, like, you're in a position where you're really affecting people's lives. And same with career direction, right? Sometimes, people, a lot of it does come down to luck, but as a manager, some piece of it has to be like, hey, I'm giving you like a particular opportunity that I think is going to be good for you, right? Or hey, like this role that you're in maybe not isn't the best role for you at the company. There might be another role where you're going to do better, or is going to give you new opportunities. And yeah, that's part of management that is wholly different from technical skills. And like, oh, I can build something, I can architect something. This is a like, okay, how do I help someone achieve? And again, this is something I wouldn't say is like a strong suit of mine. It's something I'm still learning and trying to figure out and trying to stay on top of, because a lot of times the day-to-day stuff can take over and then doesn't leave room for that strategic thinking, even on the like personal individual level for a particular person. Like, oh yeah, like where is it that you're trying to go? So I'm trying to improve on that. But yeah, I think as far as performance reviews and promotions, the best thing you can do as an individual is have that tracking of work. And whether it's a Google Doc or a text file or some other tool that you have available, I think in the end, it's up to the individual and what works for their personality and their like, okay, what is the thing that is easy for me? Maybe a physical piece of paper, wouldn't recommend, but it's very hard to search physical pieces of paper. But if that's what works for you, that might be the best.
Yeah.
Funny you say finding that time for strategic thinking. Sorry, Seth. I'll just add, I've been thinking a lot of, it's just weird that you say that, because in this last couple of weeks, I've been thinking a lot about that, about how to find the couple things I've done is, so I've decided to just take my dogs out in the middle of the day for a walk. And, I've gone to the sauna as well, just for an hour, because it's like 5-minute drive. But, those are the only ways I've really found to kind of, because it is when you have a busy day and it's not really up to you and your schedule is kind of like not necessarily yours all the time, it's difficult to find. And you need those moments to walk away from it and to get that, like you said, the zooming out from the muck and the mire of the day-to-day tedious stuff and what needs to be done, and looking at some of the grander vision. I mean, you're running several different big departments that have the opportunity to do big things. And to focus on make those strategic shifts, you need that time to just sit back and allow stuff to ruminate and pop to the surface. And I don't know how you go about doing that, but I find it very challenging myself at times.
I agree. It's very challenging, especially when you have a family and there's very little downtime.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Seth.
No, I was just going to loop in that comment by Neil, basically, saying he, advocate for yourself as if your boss doesn't want to promote you, right? Like that works for some people, right? But that's also like what you're getting at as far as like tracking what you're doing, taking the time to think about it, disconnecting at least for a little bit from, Slack or email, whatever your poison is, as far as like your distractions to reset. This discussion itself has me thinking a lot about, from a technical perspective, this like the idea of imposter syndrome, right? And trying to push and motivate people past that. Justin, I think you mentioned the fact of, hey, this tracking of everything that you're doing, not just like the project stuff, but the day-to-day, like how you support the company. This is just as valuable to a company, to an organization, to an individual, as the like large projects to, people running a podcast or whatever it is. That you can't discount the day-to-day items that actually inspire people or actually keep people going and keep the lights on. But I think that's where a lot of people get that imposter syndrome is, well, I'm just a junior, so all I'm doing is like, copy and pasting, Stack Overflow code or C++ code to implement something, right? So why would anyone care that that's what I'm doing, even though it has real value when it comes to the organization? So yeah, and I mean, along those lines then, right? Like from an imposter syndrome perspective, like, is that something that you've seen in people, Justin, as you're managing them? Or, does it just depend on the individual?
It certainly depends on the individual, but again, and I didn't know we were going to be talking about management this
Sorry.
whole time,
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast again, Justin. Yeah.
I think that's again one of the things that you can do as a manager, and because you tend to have that broader, you're in different meetings, you get to see different parts of the business that the individuals oftentimes don't, and you get to pull it and like, hey, that thing that you did, like, unblock something over there, or hey, that team that you helped out, they were like super grateful, and the thing that they built out of that was really impactful. And so that is where you can kind of take, like, yeah, like, here's the list of things that you've done, and here's a but like the bigger context is that was actually really important, right? That was actually a really cool thing that you did, and that's kind of the perspective that you can bring as the manager, and certainly from, if you're kind of like in my kind of role, like a head of security role, where you're seeing like even across the teams, to say, no, like, that may have seemed like a small thing to you or not that important, but actually it did have really good impact. Or if it's something that's ongoing, sometimes I remind people, like, hey, just the fact that you've been doing this consistently is itself an achievement, right? So many things that we try to do, like, we tried, and then it just kind of fell off, right? The one that comes to mind for me is like our secure code training that we run every month at Gusto. Sometimes nobody shows up, right? And it's like, okay. And it's like, well, is this important? It's like, yeah, it's still, like, just the fact that we have been consistently running this for like 2 or 3 years every month. Sometimes we, like, holidays, we skip a month. It is itself like kind of impressive, right? So sometimes it's just reminding people about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's it's an interesting space to live in after we've been technical for so long. I think that's probably why we have focused in on it, because I know I have weaknesses that are there, right? Like, it's so difficult. And I watched Ken struggle through this at GitHub as well. I've seen so many of our peers and our friends that have made this jump from technical to management, and then there's been quite a few that have boomeranged back to being individual contributors, to being staff engineers and other things, because it's more challenging than they expected, or they didn't get the same fulfillment out of it. And so I'm selfishly trying to figure out what that line is for me personally, to be able to motivate people, inspire, to keep things moving, but also think at a larger scale. Are there resources that you recommend? I mean, you've talked about like some Gusto management training, but are there any other resources, books, other things that you recommend? When evaluating whether or not you even want to make that jump.
Gosh, I'm really bad at reading leadership books.
I'm with you. I'd much rather read a SQL injection blog post about like recent like edge cases than I would, this is like how you inspire people. What is it, like making friends? I don't know, right? Like the Covey book.
How to make friends.
I've started a number of leadership books and not gotten very far. I think actually the thing that has been most helpful is asking other people who have done it. I reached out to folks I've worked with before, and say, like, hey, especially when this role came up and the potential of like maybe being in a CISO role, and then I was like, I need to like ask somebody, like, should I even consider this? Like, is this a good idea? Especially if it's somebody I've worked with before, right? Like, hey, like you kind of know me, like, what do you think? And I think that's probably one of the best things that you can do if you have those kind of folks that you can reach out to and just say, like, what do you think? Like, what was your experience? Of course, we've been talking about a whole bunch just now, but for me, that's a little bit easier to approach than like, I'm going to go read a leadership book. There is a pretty good one. The name it's not coming to mind, but it's about like going from the technical role into the management role. more focused on software developers. And I can kind of picture the cover, but I can't think of what it is right now. So there are definitely books out there for folks who are good at reading those kinds of like career leadership kinds of books. But yeah, sorry, I don't have like a great suggestion there.
No,
find people that you can ask.
Yeah, well, and that's that's it, right? Hence the reason I'm asking you, Justin, right? And along those lines, right? Like we've had discussions about like motivation and finding yourself in that team lead role or the management role it's an interesting place to go after you have been in the code for so long.
One thing that we get a lot of questions on that I kind of wanted to pivot to because we're running a little bit lower on time with 15 minutes left was so we've had a lot of questions around what is product. There was before a sort of what is the difference between ProdSec and AppSec conversation that we were having on these live shows as well as in Slack. I think we kind of got a general feel for it, but still there are questions on what is the day-to-day for a ProdSec team? Like, what does that look like? What areas of coverage are they managing? What does a day in the life of ProdSec look like? And so I know you can help us unlock how you're doing that now.
Well, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the team grew to a point where we were able to split. So we have folks who are more focused on building foundational security pieces for the rest of engineering to use and solving, trying to solve like horizontal problems. And then we have the security partners team, which is more focused on the consulting side, right? And sort of the traditional AppSec with like, okay, how do we, when people come in with like, oh, how do we build something or, give us advice on something. So we ended up, with enough people that we can kind of split those two roles because we did realize, I always think back to this. We would have people come in, to the Slack channel and say, hey, I need advice on something or I'm building something. And sometimes you get like 10 people weighing in, 10 security people weighing in. And then people are like, wait, like, this is really kind of distracting me from like writing software. And it's the sort of nerd sniping, like, oh, like, this is an interesting question, interesting problem, and jumping in. So we ended up splitting the roles, really, is kind of my answer there. And then we also have our identity engineering team, which is, they're focused pretty much just on authentication, like login, sessions, 2FA, account security pieces. So again, we've just kind of grown to a size, not that we're that big, but like we've grown to a size where we could split up those responsibilities and have different people focus on them. They're still kind of under this umbrella of product security because that's how the team grew. But yeah, that's kind of what's happened at Gusto. And that was just kind of an organic thing that happened and getting to the point where we're like, oh, like there's some people that are more focused in this direction, some that are more focused in that direction. It's still very much with a mindset of one, wanting to build things, right? Wanting to build solutions. And then two, that product focus, which I think the industry, like we kind of figured out, like that's the difference with product security is like having that like one step up of like, okay, it's not just about individual vulnerabilities or like just solving these, but like, okay, as a product, looking at it from the product level, how do we solve these problems? How do we give advice? How do we tailor the solutions or the advice to what we know of the product? Thinking about customer impact, thinking about, well, hey, maybe this product is MVP today, but it might grow. And when it grows, there might be different security concerns. And do we want to get ahead of that? So yeah, anyways, that's kind of what we've ended up with at Gusto. And again, it was more of an organic growth and realizing like, oh, okay, there's like different aspects of this and we have enough people that we can split it up.
Because you have mentioned a couple times now building in solutions. Like I know at GitHub we had some of our ProdSec worked on some of the things they built were like service to service auth. Making sure that we could do that securely. I don't know if those are the types of things that your team are, that team is building, or if there are other. I mean, I'd definitely be curious to hear if you can, whatever you can actually share and talk about. I know some stuff you just
Yeah,
can't.
I mean, one that we're really proud of and published blog posts on is our secure data store called Happy, HAPII, for our hardened PII store. That's one that we talk about quite a bit. Team has also done a lot of work on authorization. Service to service is something that's coming up now. I'm trying to think. Yeah, and it is very horizontal, right? And I think that's one of the things that makes it interesting to me is, as opposed to a lot of engineering teams, or like, let's say, product engineering teams, where it's like, hey, no, we're trying to solve problems across the product, across different applications, and having that broader view. And if you can land it, right, if you can land the solutions, really big impact. And I think that's one of the exciting things about being on like a security team that is doing engineering work. And I know, Ken, like that was a lot of what your team was doing at GitHub as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything from MFA and secure, just anything really related to auth, but also like internal. That's why I said I assume some of the stuff is harder to talk about, because we definitely did like internal sort of solutions, and also like, and I don't know if this is an approach you all have taken. Not only at GitHub, but also I forget which of our guests have mentioned this, but we've had guests on that have mentioned their team took the approach of trying to kill off an entire class of a bug.
Yep.
So if their most impactful things that hit them commonly are, say, I don't know, deserialization issues, or I don't know, just not doing something correctly on the REST API or whatever it might be, those are the things they're trying to kill off, is whole classes of bugs. I don't know if you all have taken a similar approach. If you've and if you have you also engineered solutions, for those things, like secure guardrails, or I don't know, overriding libraries or whatever it may be that you would do?
Yeah, that's certainly an approach that I like to take, and to me, kind of in retrospect, kind of an obvious prioritization, right? If you're like, wow, we keep seeing the same type of problem, then take a step back and like, okay, can we eliminate or like greatly reduce that problem? And does that mean guardrails? Does it mean tooling? Does it mean library changes? Does it mean removing a library or removing certain functionality, which we haven't done a lot of at Gusto, but a little bit. And saying like, oh, hey, this is something that people get confused about a lot or misuse a lot. Let's start backing that out. Let's have static analysis in place to like warn people and like, hey, this might not do what you want or what you expect. So yeah, I think that's a very valid approach. And I look at it as, like, what are the issues we see the most of? Rank them and kind of start working your way down.
Every org has their specific stuff that hits them for whatever reason, their tech stack, their development practices, just the nature of the business, like what the business purposes of the application. There's always these things that just seem to, hit you specifically. And that's why it's so valuable to have a team like yours with the GRC side of things. Because it's interesting. What's interesting with what you're doing right now is that normally, as that, like let's say you're the head of ProdSec, you have to do a lot of sort of I don't want to say politicking, more relationship building with with your GRC or with various departments. But some of those most important departments are actually already underneath you. That's got to make life like a lot easier in some sense, for sure. I would have to imagine. But I don't know.
When I stepped into this role, there was a question of should GRC be part of security? At Gusto, it's kind of bounced in and out. And I did make the argument of like, even though this is an area I don't know anything about, or very, very little, first of all, that's a good opportunity for me. And secondly, GRC had always worked most closely with security anyway. So it's like, well, why don't we just have that close relationship built in? And I do think it makes it way easier because it's a lot of those requests become internal requests instead of external requests. And it becomes internal relationships rather than external relationships. And so, yeah, I've been, I've learned a ton about GRC over the past year or so. And I really love having that close working relationship with that team.
Do you find that it's helpful to sort of like, new features, new services getting kind of put out there? They tend to not always fall under the blanket of, requiring following the change management process or releases process. Those are two different ones, obviously, but they're slightly commingled, and they are both usually very important for GRC purposes, and usually the most sort of at least, I mean, it depends where you're at, but a lot of times, the most impactful new features and services that you're shipping that you're going to have forward facing do go through GRC or do go through a release process that then, somehow GRC is a part of. Are you finding that to be the case, or is it sort of no, like we had a process and having that there's no additional awareness really outside of GRC stuff for new things? Or
I don't know that we've had so much that impact, but I will say one of the interesting things about GRC, and it's true of a lot of security, but something I didn't really realize about GRC is it's very cross-functional. It's extremely cross-functional. Mm-hmm. And it's for, like we were talking about product security, that's like more, okay, like there's a lot of interaction with engineering and maybe product development. But then GRC is like, okay, well, it's legal and it's compliance and it's procurement. And, it's like different parts of the business that maybe as a security professional, you wouldn't get that interaction or
resources,
as you were saying, like visibility. It's like, oh, well, we're doing this thing. Like, wait, we are? Okay, like we should probably at least be aware of that and jump in if needed. So, yeah, I think not to advocate for security taking over everything, but it is always good to have that cross-functional visibility. And GRC is one that gives you visibility into areas that you probably wouldn't have otherwise. So definitely.
Yeah, that's what I found was that GRC knew a lot of what was going on as a business. Yeah, with the company, things, communication that's being had with even other companies that are, for one reason, maybe it's a partnership, potential future acquire or something, or if it's like, we're going to integrate with this third party. So we've started talking to them from the legal side of things. So just have a heads up. It's just pretty crazy. If you make good friends with GRC, for me, it always felt like, wow, these are the people that are really in the know about what's going on in the business.
Good friends, or, just take over the function,
just take over the function.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Or just take over.
It's always the lawyers, man. It's always the lawyers that know, right? Like, yeah.
Legal probably has the most knowledge of anyone at the company, right?
Exactly, right. Well, I mean, you think about where the requests go, and that's like the first thing, right? Like, I know dealing with organizations, every time that we start a contract or we start talking, the first thing that goes through is an NDA, right? Like, that's always the first thing. And so, of course, that feeds into the GRC function. It feeds into other roles. I mean, finance would probably be the other place. So, Justin, you're going to take over finance too. That's what I'm hearing. It's just another avenue, another thing to learn. No. Yeah. So, I mean, that's great advice for going into an organization, or if you're already a part of an AppSec or a ProdSec team, like getting on a level with your GRC peers is going to be helpful over time. That being said, we have been going for an hour, which is, we didn't even get into Rails SQLi and
or Canada.
Or all of Canada. All of Canada.
I did want to make my Brakeman plug if that's all right.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
We were talking about me being in this new role. Absolutely, Brakeman development has totally slowed down. But there are a couple of things coming up that are kind of exciting. For those in the Ruby world, you may have heard there's a new Ruby parser library that's trying to kind of be like the one parser. So the next release of Brakeman will have the ability to optionally use that parser, which is pretty exciting. And then eventually, of course, they'll become the default.
So you used to use S expression parsing, right?
So Brakeman uses the the gem called Ruby parser from Ryan Davis, and has for forever. But now there's basically, if you turn on the Prism support, it'll try Prism first, and it can fall back to Ruby parser. There's the guy who's been building Prism built out a compatibility layer, so it will spit out roughly the same output as the Ruby parser gem. So that's happening. I also have somebody working on a refresh for the website and the HTML report from Brakeman, which has not changed in at least 10 years. And then the other thing that's pretty exciting, Rails 8, if you generate a new Rails 8, when Rails 8 comes out, if you generate a new Rails app, Brakeman will by default be part of like the sort of deployment code that it generates. Yeah. So
Dude, congrats.
Brakeman,
That's incredible.
yeah, oh man, right when I like my time to work on Brakeman is like super short. Yeah, so that's exciting news. Someone added the initial Rails 8 support for Brakeman, so that'll all be in the next release. And I'm kind of a little bit scared, but also excited for the kind of new visibility for Brakeman, as it just becomes part of the default build. And then Rails 8 is like coming out with this sort of opinionated CI setup kind of out of the box. So Brakeman is part of that. So I assume, there will be more users and more complaints coming out of that. But it's exciting to kind of see after like 14 years that Brakeman's kind of getting like a refresh of interest and visibility. So just wanted to mention that.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, congratulations on that. We'll watch it as it comes up. I'm fairly certain I'll be playing with it for engagements and code reviews, since Rails seems to be, or Ruby seems to come up for us fairly often. Outside of that, is there any last minute thoughts before we close things out today? Ken, anything else? Justin, where can people find you or reach out to you if they have further questions?
Yeah, President Beef on Ruby Social on Mastodon, LinkedIn. You can find me. Although just be aware, I have like 500 pending invites.
Invites, yes.
Yeah, yeah, you can find me on Mastodon.
Cool. Okay. Well, good. Well, thanks again for your time today. We do want to be cognizant of it. We know we have been going for an hour. Before we close things out, I did want to give a shout out to Dry Run Security for sponsoring this episode. Dry Run Security delivers near instant security code reviews and feels as if you've hired a team of the best AppSec code reviewers. It gathers security context in just seconds after a developer makes a change. From that gathered context, the company's proprietary code review process interrogates each code change based on behaviors, not just static patterns. Try it for free for yourself at dryrun.security. So thanks to Dry Run. That's Ken, of course, but thanks to Dry Run for sponsoring. And yeah, I guess otherwise we will see everyone online. Join us on Slack. Go buy some merch, right? Crocs and socks gear at merch.appsec.com. But otherwise, have a good week.
And
Vegas. Yeah. Reach out if you want to join us in Vegas. And otherwise, have a good week, and we will catch everyone online.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.